Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to talk about so far the October surprises that have occurred so far. So, people might be wondering, what is an October surprise? Well, Wikipedia defines it as the outcome of an upcoming election, particularly one for the US presidency, whether deliberately planned or spontaneously occurring. And I would argue that we've had several October surprises so far, not just in October, but before that. I'm not necessarily referring to the article in The Atlantic suggesting that Trump may have made disparaging comments about American troops, or even the Bob Woodward tapes that have shown that Trump knew this virus, the coronavirus, was a serious matter, but said that he planned to deliberately downplay it. And since then, those stories have been dwarfed by a number of other occurrences, such as probably the big one being the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which has opened up a vacancy on the Supreme Court 46 days before the election. And by the way, Mitch McConnell has already said he's going to schedule hearings on it. He probably has the votes to get her confirmed, but we're just getting started here with the surprises that have occurred. The New York Times then had that article detailing Trump's tax returns. So, contrary to what a lot of people thought, the voters actually do get to see his tax returns prior to the election, and it turns out he only paid $750 in taxes. And just think about it. He is a billionaire, supposedly. And he's only paid $750 in taxes in both 2016 and 2017, and which shows just how much he's able to gain the system. And for those who argue that he was an outsider and a working man, I think that both those things are called into question by this revelation, because he is probably the quintessential insider. Maybe he was not an elected official, but he definitely benefited from the Washington establishment. And so when he paints himself as an outsider, I think that that's inaccurate, and that's illustrated by the fact that, again, he paid less than $1,000, even though he is worth more than $1 billion. But that has now been dwarfed by the next development, which was the debate, which was a catastrophe, to put it mildly. The big moment that stood out in that debate was his failure to condemn white supremacists unequivocally. He said, quote, "Proud Boys, stand back and stand by." I think I'm reproducing that quote correctly, but I could be wrong. But I just don't understand why he can't bring himself to condemn white supremacists. It should be the easiest thing to do. That question by Chris Wallace was a softball, like a one that was nice and easy to a lob over the plate that was nice and easy to hit out in the park, and he struck out. I just don't understand it. It could be that he believes that he needs the votes of a small group of people who believe that the problems that they face are attributed to people who don't look like them. And for some reason, he believes he needs those voters, when in reality, he doesn't, and Republicans don't need them. But he is courting those voters for reasons, again, I just don't understand. I guess it's just because he'll do anything to win. And that's really what it will come down to. But we're not quite yet done, because all of that was dwarfed just a few days later by the fact that we may very well not have any more presidential debates. Why is that? Well, not only because Trump is now running against the new rules for the debate after that first one, but he's now tested positive for the coronavirus. And so has a bunch of people around him, including Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, and two of her subordinates, and as well as the First Lady, as well as his campaign manager, and a bunch of other people, such as Senators Mike Lee and Tom Tillis. And and it seems like the virus, a possible event that the virus could have spread, was at the Trump's announcement of Amy Coney Barrett as his replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So will that impact the confirmation hearings? I honestly don't think it will, but this cannot be good electoral news for him because he has spent the last 8 or so months downplaying the impact of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, it has wreaked havoc on the elderly, who, by the way, were Trump's best demographic. Well, not anymore. Polls now show that Trump is now behind Biden by 22 points with voters age 65 plus. And that to me is incredible because the elderly have tended to be one of Trump's most friendly demographics. But that has not been the case with Biden. Biden has shown a unique strength with the elderly. Well, at the same time, Trump has shown some marginal improvements with Hispanic voters. Now, will that make up for the for his loss with the elderly? Honestly, don't know. There'll be some interesting counties to watch, particularly in Florida. That's a state I'm going to be watching really early on the night because it could determine whether it's going to be an early night or whether it's going to be a night at all. Some places I'm going to be watching are going to be Sarasota, which Trump won by double digits, but Ron DeSantis only won by 9 points. It's has a higher than average median age, and so that would be supposedly where Trump would do well. But it's quite possible he'll dip into single digits, as did Ron DeSantis in 2018. So if Biden is doing, narrowing Trump's margin there to well into the single digits, that could be good news for him. Suburban wise, you might expect Biden to carry Duval County, which is where Jacksonville is. It's traditionally Republican, but Trump only barely carried it. And as well as Pinellas County, that's a typical swing area. That's where St. Petersburg is. But the area that'll be really interesting to watch, in my opinion, is Miami-Dade County. Now, Biden's not going to lose there, but the margin, excuse me, is what's going to matter. Clinton won there by close to 30%. Andrew Gillum won there by only 21%. And polls have shown that there was a poll about a month ago that showed Biden only leading by 17% in Miami-Dade County. But if he's only carrying Miami-Dade County by that amount, it's not going to matter where else he does better. Trump's going to win Florida. Biden could carry Duval County, he could carry Pinellas County, and he could narrow Trump in some of these southwestern counties into low double digits or single digits, and in the end, it won't matter because Trump has basically narrowed Biden's margin in Miami-Dade County, which is one of the biggest counties in the state, to less than 20 points. And how would that be? How would that happen? Cuban voters. It's not really the reality to simplistically say that Hispanics hate Trump, because the truth is the Hispanic community in the United States is quite complicated. And there was a report that I heard on a 538 Politics podcast that sort of surveyed the Hispanic community and found that the Hispanic voter who's most likely to support Trump is a middle-aged male Cuban voter. I believe is what they said. And they said that the person who was least likely to support Trump was a Mexican-born millennial woman. So the candidate, the second most friendly demographic for Trump, by the way, was, I believe, a American-born voter in New Mexico, who again I believe is male and middle-aged. But so it's worth noting that the Hispanic community is not a monolith, and there's complexities, like with lots of different communities, and with politically especially, because it's not a given that Biden can count on the Hispanic vote. He's doing quite well with African Americans, but Hispanic voters in the primaries went to Bernie Sanders, so that's something that he's got to keep an eye on. And I think that's something that's that could really decide a number of states, not just Florida, but also Texas, Arizona, potentially if Biden's doing really badly, New Mexico and Colorado. But I would say Arizona, Florida, Texas, potentially Nevada are all worth watching, and the Hispanic vote could very well decide those races. Another miniature October surprise took place in North Carolina. Now, this is worth mentioning because Democrats are actually considered overall favorites right now to take control of the United States Senate. But it's worth watching. Democrats probably need to flip 4 seats because they have 53 to 47 right. 50 Republicans have 53 to 47 right now, and they're currently favored to flip a Democratic-held seat in Alabama. So that means Democrats would probably need at least 4 flips. And assuming that Kamala Harris is the vice president, they'll have a majority with 50-50. Now, what flips will those be? Well, right now, Democrats are considered to be overwhelming favorites to unseat Cory Gardner in Colorado, Martha McSally in Arizona, and Susan Collins in Maine. Now, where does the 4th flip come from? Well, right now, it's considered to be Thom Tillis in North Carolina. The Democrat, Cal Cunningham, is actually considered by many outlets, including, I believe, the Economist and Elections Daily, I believe, to basically win their races as Democrats. But over the weekend, Cal Cunningham has been caught up in a sexting scandal, and keep in mind he is a married man, so maybe this won't play well in a state like North Carolina. Keep in mind, Thom Tillis actually unseated a Sunday school teacher who was the Democrat to previously hold that seat, who I believe was Democrat Kay Hagan. Yeah, she was a Sunday school teacher, and Tillis nevertheless unseated her. So if he's running against, a man who's a veteran and is someone who's well liked, but who may have been unfaithful with his wife in texting other women, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because a lot of people think that Cal Cunningham is going to outrun Joe Biden in North Carolina. Well, maybe the opposite will take place now, given the recent revelations regarding Cunningham. But it's a race to keep an eye on. But it's worth noting Democrats still seem to be overall favorites because they have a number of potential openings that could open up. And also, the scandal could not really matter. A lot of things don't seem to matter in today's age of politics. So maybe this will just boil over. But if it doesn't, then Democrats still have a number of openings that they could open up, such as Teresa Greenfield, who's running against Joni Ernst in Iowa, Steve Bullock, who is running against Senator Steve Daines in Montana, and probably the more surprising candidates on this list would probably be Jamie Harrison, who's running against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, Barbara Bollier, who's running against Roger Marshall in Kansas, and Al Gross, who's running against Dan Sullivan in Alaska. These are sort of the more surprising ones. And I honestly think that at the end of the day, those 3 in particular will probably go for the GOP. And I think that probably Democrats are overestimating their chances there. Montana and Montana and Iowa are probably, though, really competitive. And it's quite possible that Democrats will have a surprise result in Georgia, because it's worth noting that this will actually bring me to a point I want to say later on in this broadcast. But Democrats seem to be doing quite well in both the special election and the regular election. Raphael Warnock, who was considered to be counted out, who was thought the Democrats would be locked out, now it seems to be he seems to be resurging as a candidate. And Doug Collins, the Republican who's running against Kelly Loeffler, who was not Trump's pick, but Brian Kemp appointed her anyway. So Doug Collins, who was Trump's pick, is running to take her on, and then she got involved in a insider's trading scandal, which now seems to have boiled over. She now seems to have regained her position. Raphael Warnock now seems to be contending for second place, and Doug Collins now seems to have fallen. So a lot has happened in the past year, but Democrats now seem to be real contenders to take on both seats in Georgia. And that's an opening that can open up and does flail and not be able to handle this well. He has apologized and has said he's not dropping out, but we'll see how this exactly impacts the race. Thom Tillis, Richard Burr did overperform the polls in 2016. So it'll be worth to see, because if the polls are showing Cal Cunningham with the advantage, it might not be an advantage for Cal Cunningham. Now, just to close this off, I do want to explain a potential scenario that I'm going to talk about more on my Twitter account. But it basically illustrates a scenario in which Democrats could potentially win control of the Senate while Trump wins re-election. Now, that might sound crazy, but bear with me. So 7 p.m., Trump wins Kentucky and Mitch McConnell survives. In addition to that, Lindsey Graham survives, as does the Roger Marshall, Steve Daines, and a number of other Republicans in safe states who were thought to be vulnerable. In addition to that, of the competitive races, Democrats do win in Colorado, Arizona, and Maine, while Republicans do pick up the Senate seat in Alabama. Now, that leaves a number of competitive Senate races, including in Iowa and North Carolina and in Georgia. Now, it's worth noting that under this scenario, Biden successfully flips the states of Arizona and Michigan and holds Minnesota, meaning that the Democratic senators in Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Virginia all win re-election. And actually, I would say in this scenario, they outrun Biden in these states. But at the same time, there is a contest in the courts over the counting of absentees that is ultimately decided in Trump's favor by the Supreme Court. This is a complete hypothetical. I'm not saying how the election will turn out. I'm coming with a hypothetical. But the Supreme Court decides a question on absentees in Trump's favor that assures that a large number of absentees don't get counted, and that Trump is able, while Biden does flip Arizona and Michigan, he fails to flip North Carolina, he fails to flip Florida, he fails to flip Pennsylvania, and he fails to flip Wisconsin. And that is enough to put Trump over the top. Now, at the same time that Trump has won Georgia, on election night, a Senate race in Louisiana, Bill Cassidy was forced into a runoff. David Perdue was forced into a runoff with Jon Ossoff. Meanwhile, Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler advanced to a runoff that's going to be held in early January. Now, at the same time, Joni Ernst did survive. So at this point, Democrats have won 49 Senate seats. Trump has won re-election, but Democrats have 49 Senate seats while Republicans have 48. Now, like I said, Cal Cunningham fails to unseat Thom Tillis, and Thom Tillis actually ends up outrunning Trump due to the sexting scandal, while Joni Ernst just barely manages to stop Teresa Greenfield from unseating her. Well, at the same time, races in Georgia go to runoff, and Louisiana go to runoffs, and while at the same time, so those runoffs are going to be decided in early December or early January. And I believe, I could be wrong, the first Saturday of December, a runoff is held in Louisiana, which is decided in favor of the incumbent Republican Senator, Bill Cassidy. But it is a closer than expected race, indicating that Democratic enthusiasm remains rampant as a result of Trump's victory. Then that Tuesday, in what is probably a shock result to a lot of people, Jon Ossoff unseats David Perdue because, again, Democratic enthusiasm is through the roof in Georgia. And then in the first Tuesday of January, Raphael Warnock unseats Kelly Loeffler. So Democrats have at this point taken control of both Senate seats in Georgia, giving them control of the United States Senate. So Trump has won re-election. Meanwhile, Democrats control both houses of Congress. And this sets them up for a probable big victory in the 2022 midterms for them to potentially build off of both majorities. So this is not necessarily going to happen, but this is a hypothetical that I wanted to illustrate. And I'm going to talk about this more on my Twitter feed tonight. I'm going to have illustrations. I wish I could use illustrations more on the stream. I'm going to try to figure out how to do that at a later point. But I just wanted to illustrate that particular hypothetical, and I'm going to talk about it more tonight. But it's something to think about, because people who say that it's quite likely that Republicans are holding the Senate if Trump wins re-election. there's a potential way that that could not happen. Anyway, I'm glad I got to stream today. Hope to stream more on a daily basis going forward. It's going to depend on how much I'm able to keep a handle on my work. Got a lot to do, but hopefully I'll be able to stream a bit more often. And we'll talk about more as the election heats up. There's probably going to be more October surprises. This is probably going to be something I'm talking about a lot. But hopefully there's going to be a lot more to talk about. And hopefully we'll have a winner very soon when the votes are cast. It's not necessarily the case that we need to have a winner on election night. We might, but we might not. With a lot of voters casting ballots by mail, we could possibly not have a winner on election. In fact, I'd say that's likely. It's also likely that Trump will be leading on election night in states that he ultimately loses. And there is nothing nefarious about this. There's talked about what's been talked about is something called a blue shift. And as votes becoming more democratic as the mail-in ballots get cast in. Now, this was at a time when 4% of ballots were mail-in. Now, with 40% of ballots mail-in, there's probably a lot of states that Trump is going to be leading on election night that he ultimately does not win. And we need to be prepared for this. And we need to be ready to call Trump out if he claims fraud when there is none. So that is something we should be vigilant about as we watch the results come in on election night. Anyway, I'm really glad to stream. I'm really glad I got to stream today, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.